Marcel Nutter, member of the City Club's Board of Governors. For 100 years, City Club of Portland is where civic-minded people come together to make Portland and Oregon a better place for everyone to live, work, and explore. We're gathered at the Sentinel Hotel along with you listening on OPB, viewing on Portland Community Media on YouTube. The generous support of City Club's corporate and media partners enables us to put the state's best civic programs week after week. Our media partner is Oregon Business Magazine, and our current Friday Forum sponsors are Chevron Corporation, Eco Northwest, Morel Inc., Northwest Natural, and Vacasa Vacation Rentals. Please show your appreciation for all of them. Today's topic is, are the arts getting squeezed out? Portland's real estate crunch is impacting more than just affordable housing. It's creating a crisis in the arts. Individual organizations and small creative businesses face high rents and lack of space. Portland is in danger. Is Portland in danger of losing the independent, creative character that this city prides itself on, and attracting the very businesses that are driving demands for space? Artists and organizations will share their stories with a panel to dissect the problem and offer ideas to addressing it. Moderated by Kelly Roy, founder and owner of ADX, Portland Made. This panel discussion features Commissioner Nick Fish of Portland City Council, Mary Kay West, Senior Vice President at Colliers International. We'll also hear from storytellers Subhashini Ganesan, also known as Suba, from New Expressive Works, A.M. O'Malley from Independent Publishing Resource Center, Artist Repertories Theater's Sarah Horton, and artist Joanne Liccardo. Our moderator, Kelly Roy, is the founder and owner of ADX and Portland Made, and has become a globally recognized leader in the maker movement. She co-authored Cartopia, Portland's food cart revolution. Her passion is helping creatives hone their skills, start their own businesses, and make a living doing what they love. Panelist Nick Fish was first elected to the Portland City Council in 2008 and re-elected in 2010 and 2014. In their 2014 endorsement, the Portland Mercury called Nick one of the most effective and values-minded city commissioners during his 6 years on the council. Nick serves as commissioner in charge of the Water Bureau and the Bureau of Environmental Services. He also serves as council liaison for the arts, older adults, neighborhood small businesses. Panelist Mary Kay West is Senior Vice President of Colliers International. She's a leader in leasing, acquisition, and disposition of office, mixed use, and industrial properties in the Portland metropolitan area. She has managed properties for large institutional owners, supervised commercial loan administration and market research departments, as well as worked on new business development and property management takeovers. She's also worked with numerous arts and culture organizations to secure space, including Independent Publishing Resource Center, Hand-to-Mouth Theater, and Conduit Dance. Please welcome our guests to the City Club.
Great, thanks everyone. So we're going to jump right in here. We have a really tight schedule with a lot of storytellers that are going to come up on stage and join us. So I thought I'd start. So Nick, last October, the city declared a housing emergency due to the skyrocketing price of housing rentals and our growing homeless population. What do you see as the connection between this and some of the issues that we're also dealing with affordable workspace for people to do business here in Portland?
Well, thank you, City Club, for the invitation, and I'm delighted to be here. And I also want to acknowledge Eloise Damrosch, my partner in crime from the Regional Arts and Culture Council, that is here today. Eloise, let's give her a round of applause. So the question you're asking is, what's the relationship between the housing emergency we declared and the challenge we now face with creative people being priced out of our city and organizations? And it is, I think, the essential question. We are a destination city, and one of the advantages of living in a city that over the years has developed the reputation we have is that people want to come here. And people are coming here, and they are starting businesses here, they are buying homes here. We're the fastest growing urban economy in America as a region. And people, yeah, that's worthy of a round of applause. We had a recession a number of years ago. People are coming in here, and that's wonderful, but here's the unintended consequence. People are coming to Portland and bidding up the price of land and houses and rental apartments. And as a result, it is becoming increasingly unaffordable for lots of people in our community. And not just full-time minimum wage workers and older adults, working families, first-time homeowners, and young creatives. Now let's connect the dots. Young creatives are coming to our city because it's a cool city and because it has a deep commitment to art and culture, and it has a wonderful environment, and there's a lot of things we're doing right. And we are in competition with cities across America for those young creative types. They're mostly millennials. They're coming here, and as a result, jobs are coming here, and employers are expanding because we have this talent pool. But what happens if we cannot find affordable homes and spaces for people to do their work? And that's the challenge. And to your question, right now the crisis we're dealing with is a crisis of too many people living on our streets and literally priced out of the market. And if we had one extra dollar to spend, I think the community would say, invest in the most vulnerable people. That's our moral obligation. So within that context, how do we create space to talk about investing in performing arts space, live workspace for artists, and other kinds of things which are going to keep us a center of arts and culture? That's the tension. And my belief is they're not mutually exclusive. I believe that we are morally bound and duty bound to address the crisis on our streets. But if we take our eye off of the challenge that artists and performing artists and nonprofits are facing, we're at risk of losing something that makes Portland special, and that is the art and culture scene.
Great. So Mary Kay, you're well known for your involvement in the arts community here and helping nonprofit organizations find spaces over the years. So what do you see as the challenges, and how has that landscape changed over the years?
Well, first of all, I would also like to say thank you to the City Club for the invitation to speak. I think, as Nick said, it's really two sides of the same coin. In addition to affordable housing in the Central City, we've got to have the affordable commercial space in the Central City. It doesn't make sense to have people be able to live here but have to work out in Wilsonville or Hillsborough, or vice versa. And I think that some of the challenges are that a lot of the kinds of space that lend itself to, in particular, arts organizations or maker organizations where you need large open spaces, column-free spaces, space for tools and materials and performers and those kinds of things, those are typically found in industrial buildings. And of course, we have the Central East Side Industrial District. There's a lot of that kind of inventory there, but the zoning, number one, doesn't necessarily allow for those kinds of uses because you're going to have a higher density for the number of people. You might not have the required seismic upgrading. You might not have the sprinklering. So there are physical things. And then there are also the occupancy issues in terms of, again, stuff that is zoned industrial allows for industrial uses. There are small exemptions for retail, but again, 3,000 square feet or less, and with the new EOS overlay of the comprehensive plan, that can be bumped up to 5,000 square feet. So there's a real challenge to find the kind of space that physically will accommodate what are often the unusual requirements of makers and artists, particularly performing arts groups.
Yeah, great. That's definitely one of the things that I keep hearing on a regular basis, getting calls on a daily basis from makers and artists who are being displaced from many of our buildings that have historically housed these organizations. So it's really disheartening to hear that. But we're going to have our first storyteller come up, Joanne Liccardo. She was in the town storage building, right at the end of the Burnside Bridge in the Central East Side. And there were hundreds of artists that were designers, makers, creatives that were displaced from those low-cost studio spaces. So, Joanne, we'd love to have you tell a little bit of your story or of what that was like and where you are now.
Okay. This is my first time here, and I got right to the president's table. I just wanted to, anyway. I was in Portland, I was in town storage for 8 years, and, it was sold and totally redone, and now they're renting it out for, I think, $165 a square foot, and we paid $1 a square foot. And now I'm in Portland storage, which is just down the street from there, and I don't know how long that's going to last. But town storage was a wonderful place for artists to come together. It was a really nice community of people, and we were able to do a lot of things as a community, and I really miss it. And I don't know what is in the future, really. I also teach classes, and so I need a space to do that. And it's getting to be really hard here. So.
Great, thanks, Jen. Sorry that's a hard story to follow up with. Well, good luck to you, right? So we're going to be really looking and pushing our elected officials pretty hard to come up with solutions for the displacement that's happening. But if you're just tuning in on OPB, you're listening to City Club of Portland's Friday Forum. I'm Kelly Roy, owner and founder of ADX. We are here discussing the changing landscape of artists and creative spaces in inner Portland. So maybe Nick and Mary Kay, you can speak a little bit to what are some of the ways that we can help prevent the displacement of artists, creatives, makers, really the cultural producers of our city that make it such a wonderful place for everyone to live?
Well, let's first acknowledge that what happened at town storage was sort of the canary in the tunnel. And it was a shock, I think, to a lot of us to see such an important resource closed down, and so many people who depended on affordable space to do their craft and their art displaced. And so, first, you have our sympathy, and your cause is our cause. And what we have to do is make sure that there is affordable space for creative people in our community. Now, I'll tell you a couple things I want to do in the Central East Side, because that's where the town is located. Number one, we've just done a rezoning called the Southeast Quad Plan. I don't want to get too wonky about what we did and didn't do, but the idea is to preserve the character of the Central East Side while creating incentives for new industrial and office development. The truth is, I think we're going to see a lot more office than industrial. I think that's just how structurally the game is going to play out. And so here's an idea. We've got 2 properties that are owned by ODOT right in the heart of the Central East Side. They are huge opportunities for the city to acquire those sites. And what I'd like to see is a nonprofit community development corporation formed and charged with managing both sites. Give them the dirt and have a nonprofit CDC develop affordable industrial and office space for the creative economy. That's one thing we can do to make sure that we don't keep displacing people from the Central East Side.
Great, yeah. Mary Kay, do you have any thoughts on what specifically we can do to help to protect some of these spaces?
I do have some thoughts on that. First of all, I want to say I have been a real estate broker for 28 years, so I make my living in the field of real estate. And as much as we would like to think that everybody is very altruistic and has the ability to be incredibly philanthropic, the fact is that most landlords and owners of real estate are in the business to make money. So how do we utilize everything that's in our toolkit to not only create those affordable spaces, but to still make them pencil out for the landlords and the developers that own that real estate? Can we do tax incentives for historic tax credits, new market tax credits? Are there low interest or no interest loans that can be done? Can we do things like, for example, Mercy Corps Northwest? I don't know if you're familiar with John Haynes. He's the executive director over there, and they have created a community REIT. So his goal is economic empowerment. They've purchased an asset out in Southeast Portland, very, very low threshold, literally like $10 to $100 a month of investment. So it's a very low bar, and the idea is to get all of the folks living in that lower income neighborhood to be able to invest in something. How about, rather than just being geographically defined, perhaps we could look at a community REIT that is driven by mission. So you could look at the artists, their patrons, the people that participate in the artistic process, and create some sort of community REIT there. So I think we need to make sure that this conversation has not only the folks from the artist and maker community and the private sector, the developers and the owners, but we've got to make sure that we're taking advantage of all of the public tools that might be available to us, so that the folks that are taking the risk to build and develop can actually see some sort of return on their investment.
I love these two suggestions. The question is, who does it and how to actually get it done? Right now, there's currently a pretty big leadership vacuum at PDC, and we have a newly elected mayor that will be coming into office. So is PDC the place to do that, and how do they do it, and how quickly can it happen given that we are kind of in a state of crisis?
Well, let me tell you why I'm optimistic. First of all, the city of Portland just elected a very strong pro-arts mayor. And Ted Wheeler at the Arts Forum made some very firm commitments about leading the arts agenda in our city. So that's a plus. Number two, we're going through a leadership change at the Portland Development Commission, and we're having a debate about what should be the future of PDC. Under Sam Adams, it was focused primarily on economic development. Under Mayor Hales, it has focused more on placemaking. There is a question about which of the relative mix of focus for the agency. My bias is job creation and economic development, but we can do both. But the bottom line is, I think PDC has an indispensable role here. And the first thing I'd like to see happen is PDC partner with RAC and Eloise and do a comprehensive survey of cultural spaces in our community, like Seattle has done. Seattle has a database online where you can see the complete inventory of cultural spaces. So the first thing we have to do is have good data. Second, I think we have to then add the Planning Bureau to that conversation, and we have to look at the toolkit, as you've alluded to. What are the tools? Direct investment, incentives. Sometimes we hear from developers, just get the heck out of the way. So what are the things that the city can do to promote affordable works and live space? And here's the third idea that involves PDC. PDC has 2 urban renewal districts in Lentz and in Gateway that have had mixed results. And they really haven't had that spark yet that has led them to be successful urban renewal districts. Well, artists are getting displaced from the central part of our city. What if we consciously decided that we wanted to create hubs of community around creative people in places like Lentz and Gateway, where we're actually, it's more affordable, and we know that the creative economy could help jumpstart their economy. So I want that to be part of the vision for how we're going to continue to build up Mid and East County.
So the world that I'm in is called the Maker Movement. For those of you who haven't heard of the Maker Movement, it really is the fuel for the future of our manufacturing economy. One of the spaces in our city that has been an incredible resource over the years is the Independent Publishing Resource Center. Unfortunately, they were given notice that their rent was going to triple. So they are having to try to identify a new space. We're going to have A.M. O'Malley from IPRC come up and tell a little bit about their story and their experience. But one of the other connections that, as a small business owner, I think we need to make is as housing becomes more affordable. If you have a tripling of your rent for your housing situation, and you also have a tripling of rent for your small business, that's a pretty huge impact on someone. So AM, do you want to tell us a little bit about your experience with IPRC and how easy is it to find real estate here?
Oh, yeah. Hi everyone. Good afternoon. So just to give a little context first about the IPRC, in addition to what Kelly so eloquently said, the IPRC has been around for 18 years, and we have served as not only a launch pad for many artists. Miranda July was actually one of our first members, if you know who she is. And not only do we do that, but we also actually provide a lot of outreach services to both K-12 students, but also people who are homeless and people who are incarcerated. So that tension between providing funding to arts and providing to people who are in the most need in Portland is truly connected. So the IPRC has been notified that our rent will go up 300%, and so we are in a position to find a new space. We're a publication studio, among other things, and so we have thousands and thousands of pounds of lead type and letter presses, screen printing equipment, a computer lab. We also have a very, what I like to call sleek budget, which means that we don't have a lot of options to pay rent. And so we're looking at, is there a city center anymore in Portland? Where do we go? How do we remain accessible? We really need to be able to work creatively with the community and the city, and we're finding that to be a challenge. Making connections is also a challenge.
Great. So yeah, this is a common story. We hear this a lot, and we're working really hard to try to identify existing property owners in the Central East Side that want to keep their spaces affordable for these type of makers, producers, artists. So if you have real estate in the Central East Side and are that person, please let us know. So the zoning changes that recently happened with the Southeast Quadrant Plan, how is that impacting IPRC and other organizations? Mary Kay, you talked about a little bit before, but seems like there's a lot of speculation going on. So what do you think?
Well, it's interesting. AM mentioned, or the introduction for AM mentioned that the rent for their space will triple upon renewal. And one of the reasons that is likely to occur is because they are in a space that's largely warehouse, about 2,600 square feet and about 1,000 square feet of office. And because of the new comprehensive plan and the EOS overlay, not going to get too wonky here, which increases the retail exemption from 3,000 square feet to 5,000 square feet, their space, which is in excess of 3,000 square feet, could potentially be rented to a brewery, a distillery, a restaurant, a cannabis shop, and those kinds of tenants are paying the kinds of rents that would triple things. I live close in Southeast, and I'm not going to lie. I love being able to walk anywhere I want to walk and have a great beer or a great restaurant. But to piggyback on what Nick was saying, I would put forth the argument that part of place-making is not just having those kinds of opportunities, but having the opportunity to participate and view cultural and artistic and making endeavors. People are not moving to Portland to live in the central city and go out to Hillsborough for their theater, or they're not moving to the central city to go out to Gresham to take their kids to lessons in welding or glass making. We've got to realize that this is a very important part of placemaking, and if the cultural part of our central city leaves, that makes us less attractive to millennials, and that has a very significant economic impact. I would also argue that the kinds of organizations that we're talking about here actually are a big part of our economic health. These organizations employ people, they buy supplies, they buy food and drinks. When somebody comes to see a play or see a performance, drop their kids off for lessons, they go down the street and they buy a meal, they have coffee, they visit the neatest boutique that's a couple blocks away. So I would argue that these cultural and artistic groups are very much an important economic driver for our central city.
Can I add one thing on that? How many employees do you have?
Employees.
Well, you have 4 employees, and so 95% of our small businesses in Portland employ 5 or fewer employees. Think about that. We have 50 neighborhood business districts, and 95% of the small businesses employ 5 or fewer. Now, I'm looking at John Russell, former chair of the Portland Development Commission. When Daimler says they want to put their headquarters here, the city bends over backwards, correctly in my judgment, to put a headquarter business here. When Nike says they're looking at coming downtown to put their offices, the city is very receptive. I don't know that we are as attentive to these smaller businesses. And we're a small business town. We're not Seattle. We're not a city of big Fortune 500 companies. We're a city of small businesses that we want to grow into medium-sized businesses. And that's the genius of the maker movement. And so it matters that IPRC is here. It matters that the comic book industry is doing well here and the independent publishing business. That's part of Portland. And I think we have to put more resources at PDC into protecting the smaller businesses that are part of our creative economy.
Yes, great. Great, thanks, Sam. If you're just tuning in on OPB, you're listening to City Club of Portland's Friday Forum. I'm Kelly Roy, owner and founder of ADX. We are here discussing the changing landscape of artists and creative spaces in inner Central East Side Portland. So yeah, that's an interesting, one of the things that we do is an annual survey that attempts to quantify the job creation of this movement. That's with Portland State University and Charles Hain. And it does turn out that when you collectively put all of these small businesses together and measure how many jobs they're creating, it's tens of thousands of jobs. It's billions of dollars in economic activity. And it's all connected in our local ecosystem, and that business-to-business interaction is what keeps local dollars here and allows us to invest in community infrastructure, schools, et cetera. So I love the idea of putting more emphasis on supporting small businesses. Mary Kay, can you maybe speak a little bit more about what that could look like?
Well, I think one of the ways that we can support small businesses is to recognize that a lot of small businesses are the reason that the larger businesses are moving here. The reason we have companies like Airbnb and Google and Amazon and on and on and on coming into Portland is because this is a great city to live in. There is a lot of stuff to do here. There are lots of opportunities for the kinds of talent that they have to hire and retain. So I think it's very important to recognize that small businesses are one of the things that makes us so attractive for our economic development. I think also that we have to recognize that if we can figure out how to create, whether it's a district, it's a center, it's something like what they've done in Brooklyn or Oakland or Cleveland, where they have created an entire area that has spaces for makers, for artists, for people to sell their work, for retail, for people to attend performances. That becomes then a critical mass. And it is something that draws more and more people to the arts and to makers. So I would really like to see us reconvene, and I'm not going to use the right term here, the Arts Tax Advisory Council. The people that worked around doing the arts tax, first of all, let's figure out how to actually collect it. But then second of all, let's put a committee together where we have public folks, we have developers like the John Russells, Al Solheim, Jim Winkler, Mark Edlin, Brad Malzahn, all people who are very dedicated to the arts and dedicated to the fabric of our community, people from the arts organizations, people that are the small business owners. Let's bring all of those stakeholders together, and once we figure out how to collect that arts tax, figure out what can we do with it to create a critical mass of space where all of these kinds of groups can be together and create incredible synergy that benefits everybody that participates in it and experiences it.
Well, I want to second that. And the Creative Advocacy Network and its predecessors, every time we've asked the arts community and leaders to step up to solve a problem, they've delivered. And look at the track record over the last 10 years. The Right Brain Initiative, which is getting national attention for what we're doing in our schools. Work for Art, which is bringing more and more people into workplace giving and making it easy. But also the arts tax. And yes, we're only at 72% compliance rate. And yes, there's still too many people in our community who think it's optional. But it's generating $9 million, and 40,000 children in elementary school now have arts in the schools. That's worth celebrating, 40,000 children. And what we know is that when those children get arts education, they do better in every discipline, and they become better prepared to be the workforce of tomorrow. So a city that can figure out all those things, I think if we bring the same thoughtful people to the table, can make a dent on the challenge we face right now with affordability.
That's great. So next we're going to have Subhashini Ganesan come up, and she's an artist here in Portland who has some fans in the audience here. She has a mission-oriented performance space. She's a classical Indian dancer and teacher and the founder of New Expressive Works, an incubator community for local choreographers and emerging artists. So Subha, do you want to tell us a little bit more about your experience with your organizations and how you're doing on your experience of getting ownership of your space?
Sure. Thank you for having me here. Yes, I'm a choreographer and artistic director and teaching artist. I walked into Southeast, I can't even remember the address at this point, 810 Southeast Belmont, hoping to just have a little space to be able to teach my classes and create new work. That was in 2010. 2012, the large space, which is a 2,500 square foot accessible performance space, became available because the person who was running it had to stop running it. And Carol Zoom, who was then the owner of the building, asked if I would run the space, and I said, yes. So I went from artist, choreographer, teaching artist to a space manager. I went around, asked community members what was perhaps missing in the dance and performing community, and I heard that there's not enough space for local artists to incubate and create new work, a safe space to do that. And in 2012, I started a residency program to bring 4 artists every 6 months to get free rehearsal space and be offered a produced performance at the end. I'm happy to say that we're at our 7th installment of that residency, and RAC has given us a grant so that we can give small stipends to these artists. So that residency program, I believe, is really serving the arts community. Many of them have moved on from not being known to performing at very prestigious events like TBA and Northwest festivals up in Seattle. In addition, I curate a diverse number of classes so that all cultural genres can be visible within the Portland society. So we have classical South Indian dance, Bharatanatyam, happening right next to modern dance, Argentine tango, Japanese taiko. So this convergence of cultures, convergence of artistic processes is what's happening in these spaces, close to about 150 lead artists, and that does not include their collaborators, their costume designers, the tech designers. They are sustained by these two spaces, and we almost lost them when Carol Zoom had to sell her building, and that's actually when I met Mary Kay West, thanks to RAC and its cultural leadership program. And Mary Kay West helped me save the space. And due to all of that, I created a nonprofit organization called New Expressive Works to be an umbrella and also to begin receiving contributed income, because my rent doubled and earned income is really not an option anymore to keep space affordable and safe for artists while the space remains functional.
Wow, what a great story. Thanks to RAC for helping out. I thought you were going to say PDC, but it was RAC, in fact, that helped you do that. We're going to move right into our next storyteller, but thanks for sharing that with us, Suba. And for all that you're doing, I love this increase in incubators in Portland. We consider ADX an incubator for new makers and manufacturers. There's a food incubator called Kitchen Crew. And then we're starting an apparel lab, an apparel incubator. So I love the fact that there are these buildings and people and resources that are connecting to continue to develop out our future artists and small businesses. So next we have Sarah Horton of Artist Repertory Theater. It's the longest running professional theater company in Portland, founded in 1982. You're their managing director. And something interesting is brewing at Artist Repertoire Space in Southwest Portland.
Something interesting. So we came at this problem a little bit backwards in that we were a small organization that happened to own a very large facility. And our financial need to get that facility really working and activated kind of combined with the community need for affordable space. And a couple of years ago, this really blossomed into something we call the Arts Hub Project, where Artists Rep and 10 other performing arts organizations cohabit in the space. We provide administrative, performance and rehearsal space at sliding scale rental rates. So it means these 10 organizations are paying maybe 50 to 60% of what it would cost out at market to rent those spaces. And what we are discovering is a lot of financial strengthening that's happening, but also a lot of wonderful artistic collaboration that's finally starting to bloom there too. And we really look forward to finding further support for this effort so we can really see where we can take this model and replicate it.
Great, that's a great story. This is the second time I've noticed this, but I just want to point out that all of our leaders here have been women. I'm super stoked about that. The future is female and collaborative, and I really appreciate all that you're doing in the community for theater. So, Nick, did you want to follow up with a thought there?
I want to make sure that we also bring in this idea of helping arts organizations acquire spaces and own space, because really in a rising tide, that's the best strategy. And Victoria Fry's here. Let's congratulate Pica for finding a home on the east side. And thanks to a generous board member, Dance Space has found a nice space on the east side. Body Vox has a new home, and Portland Playhouse has repurposed a church. Those are the lucky ones. And I think we should be looking at how we can help people have that long-term solution. But where is Milagro Theater going to be in 5 years? Where are the culturally specific organizations that are still struggling to find their permanent location? And are we going to allow them to be pushed out of our city? Here's an idea I just want to share, because you've asked us to be constructive with our suggestions. I think we have a tremendous opportunity in this city to repurpose sacred places in the next 20 years. I lived and grew up in New York City, and as my church, where I was baptized, St. Mark's Church in the Bowery, became less of a place of worship, it evolved into a major arts mecca. And it is now today home of ontological hysteric theater, dance space, a poetry project, and a whole slew of community-based arts organizations. Well, we have a corollary here. FAME, the wonderful arts group that Steve and Mark Boudoir runs, is in a church. Portland Playhouse acquired a church. We know there's lots of older churches in our community that have declining congregations. What if part of our strategy was to repurpose sacred places as cultural hubs in our neighborhoods?
I love this idea of helping businesses buy their buildings, and also previously mentioned having communities investing in the real estate as well. These are really thought-provoking ideas. Mary Kay, did you want to add something to the mix with any thoughts around how we can go about helping small businesses and arts organizations purchase their buildings?
To build on what Nick is saying, in addition to repurposing sacred spaces, what about things like Memorial Coliseum, the post office site? That's going to be a huge development. It would seem that there could be room there for some sort of cultural component. The Paulette family has several properties that are located in the Central East Side Industrial District, and as that family begins to transition its leadership to the next generation, I know that they are very much wanting to create some sort of legacy for their families. So the idea of trying to repurpose things that are existing, I think also just fits with the ethos of Portland. For purchasing, that's absolutely the ideal thing, because it's great to get a 3 or a 5 or a 7 or a 10-year lease in place, but then what happens upon renewal? I mean, it's very difficult when you have a market like this where, I don't know, rents have probably gone up somewhere between 25 and 50% in the Central East Side Industrial District within the last year. So if you have a lease in place and someone's paying their 3% annual rent increase, 5 years down the road, they're still probably facing a 20, 25, 50% increase in rent on renewal. So I would love to see some of these ideas in terms of, again, I mentioned John Haynes doing that community REIT, and do it around something where it's a theme, whether it's all kinds of makers or artists. I mean, each of these kinds of groups have a natural constituency that would potentially want to be involved in something like that. I mean, most people patronize arts groups and buy things from makers on a very regular basis. What about if some of that investment could literally be their constituency, helping them own their building so that they know that it's something permanent? I definitely think that's something that we should explore.
Thank you. We're now going to open it up to the Q&A portion of the program. If you have a written question on an index card, please hold it up high so the City Club staff can collect it from you. Before asking your question, please identify yourself as a City Club member and ask your question in 30 seconds or less.
Bill Dickey, City Club member. Kelly, I'm a fan of ADX. I shop there occasionally. Tell me, what is the difference when she was talking about $1 a square foot at the town building? How much do they, this is just curiosity, how much do they charge per square foot at the activity space buildings?
At Active Space? Active Space. Do you know what they charge at Active Space?
I'm not sure exactly what they charge at Active Space, but one thing that I want to get into the mix is when you're talking about rental rates, especially industrial, you have to make sure you're very clear on, is this a rental rate per square foot per month, or is it an annual rental rate? So I'm not sure about town storage. My suspicion is that it wasn't just $1 a square foot per year. That would mean somebody maybe paid $250 for an entire year for a space. It was probably monthly, so if you convert that, that's $12 a square foot on an annual basis. I would guess Active Space is probably charging maybe somewhere in the mid to high teens.
Sounds about right. We have a question here from one of our civic scholars. As a young person who is interested in a career in media and arts, do you feel like individuals with business or other careers as such are taken more seriously? Why are the arts being pushed out of Portland when art majors do the same amount of work, maybe even more? Why aren't we getting paid the same amount? What advice would you give to a young artist as myself? Love it.
I'll do a quick comment on that. I think that there is the opportunity for terrific synergy between the business world and the arts. I mean, my introduction to it was when we had business and culture in the Culture and Arts in Business. I went through their leadership training program, and the purpose of it was to train people in business for service on nonprofit boards as opposed to for-profit boards. And as I've found over the last several years, I went on to become a board member for the IPRC and was actually chair of that board for over 5 years. People need arts organizations and maker organizations and small businesses need the experience and expertise of business people, people that have had to learn how to do budgeting and strategic planning and human resources and those kinds of things. So there's a great crossover there, and I think that there can be wonderful synergy bringing the business community into the arts and helping arts organizations run more efficiently and effectively. I mean, if you are an arts organization that is getting grants, you have to have an annual budget. You can't carry a lot of debt. You have to be able to demonstrate to a granting organization, this is the amount of money I make from ticket sales, from program, from earned revenue, from private donation. Nonprofits are actually a pretty darn good bet when it comes to being tenants that pay their rent. If they don't, then they're not going to be getting grants.
Great. Would you like to go ahead and ask your question?
Edward Hershey, City Club member. I want to second what you said, Mary Kay, about the need for the arts to be downtown. Pushing them out of town adds a kind of a ironic twist to the term gentrification. In that light, Commissioner Fish, I have a question for you. Municipalities have experimented with various degrees of success with inclusionary zoning for affordable housing, mandated public space and public arts like sculptures with development. Is there a model that can tie and mandate space for the arts to large-scale development?
Well, it's a great question. And, here's our toolkit. We can invest public dollars, we can create incentives for activity, or we can remove the impediments so the private sector can do it without as many barriers. Let's go to the incentive side. There's a couple of ways that we can do incentives, and it's generally linked to giving people more height. So if we tell a developer, we'll give you a little more height, which usually translates into more profit, and we condition that on putting some ground floor performance space or entering into an agreement with a nonprofit arts organization, that's where we have leverage. We have to offer something in exchange for something. The challenge we're going to face is that, going back to an earlier question, because we're in a housing crisis, the city is in the process of sharpening all of its incentive programs to create more affordable housing, and at the cost of trimming our incentives of things like green roofs and potentially this kind of option. What I would argue is the post office site is the classic example. The city's going to do master planning in the post office site. It is in a cultural district in the shadow of the Pacific Northwest College of Art, the North Park blocks and Broadway, which we are intentionally trying to create as a cultural district. Let's mandate in the development in that district that there be affordable art space on the ground floor of any development that the city subsidizes.
Great. So here's a very direct question. Who or what office among the city's elected officials can struggling artists go to now for help, not just advice?
So I'm at City Hall. My name is Nick Fish. I'm on the second floor. I have a couple people on my staff, including Paige, would you raise your hand, who do arts liaison work. We're very proud of what she does. I work closely with Eloise Damrosch and the talented people at RAC. RAC, by the way, gets about $9 million a year from the arts tax, and the city gives them about $4 million a year in general fund. If I had one wish today, it's that we'd get the compliance rate up on the arts tax so that we could boost the general operating support dollars from $2.6 million to about $4 million, because these general operating support dollars are what a lot of these struggling nonprofit organizations need. You can come to my office, you can come to RAC, but as I said, the city has just elected a mayor who has said he will have a liaison in his office to the arts community, and he will lead the arts agenda for this city. So maybe you'll get two heads for the price of one.
Let's hold him to that.
Great. First 100 days, right? Okay, got a list. Go ahead and ask your question.
I'm Bob Sterry, a very recent new member of the City Club, and I wish I was a landlord in this city, but I'm not. I'm an artist, I'm a singer, a poet, and a writer. I don't need much space. But the question I have is, in this conversation, who represents the landlords and the developers? Because they're not thugs, and there are some very creative people in that community, and I think they should be included somehow. So I'd be interested in the panel's comments on how that could be accomplished.
I totally agree with you. We have, I think, a wealth of very talented, thoughtful, well-considered developers and landlords in Portland, many of whom are very, very invested in the community and very invested in the arts and in the maker movement. We definitely need to have those folks in the conversation. And again, names such as John Russell, Al Solheim, Jim Winkler, Brad Malson, the Melvin Mark family. All of these people are folks who have been instrumental in so many different projects that have created the richness of the Portland Central City and our skyline, and they, at the same time, have been extremely supportive of the arts. Another developer that I can think of is Mike Tevis. Mike owns the Ford Building, which is located in Southeast at the corner of 10th and Division. I don't know, I think that building is home to maybe 80 or 90 tenants. Lots and lots of small tenants, small businesses, small makers, small artists. And Mike was at a town hall forum that we did about 3 weeks ago. I'm not going to be exactly correct on the numbers, but he talked about this idea of being able to have some sort of affordable component, whether it was affordable commercial space or affordable housing in a new development, and talked about how when he's done that kind of work in the city of Portland, the financing or the monies that he has gotten have been maybe $100,000 or less. He's been able to do the same kind of thing down in Salem and be able to get millions of dollars of low and no-cost loans to be able to add in these affordable components. So we definitely need to bring the developers to the table and ask them what is working, what isn't working, what are the incentives that are most valuable to you to help you make this investment pencil out.
And just if I could add one thing to that, I don't think our challenge is with our homegrown developers. What we're experiencing now is a flood of money from outside of our community that's coming in and beginning to dominate the landscape. In the last 3 years, we've added over 23,000 apartments to this city in the private sector. 85% of them are classified as luxury apartments, meaning they are unaffordable to most Portlanders. Only 3% are affordable by any definition. So that's a market force. And it is driven a lot by out-of-town money that's coming in here because our market is undervalued between Seattle and San Francisco. But you know, to your point, Brad Malzahn and Sam Adams and others got together and did Milepost 5. Brian Wanamaker, through the Falcon Art Community, has really created a wonderful space in our community. Ken Uncless in the old Columbia Sportswear building. Al Solheim in the Stagecraft building. Jim Winkler in his developments. And I completely agree with you. let's engage the public-spirited developers who are homegrown and ask them what mix of incentives and us getting out of your way will allow you to replicate the success you've already had creating artist housing in our community.
Let's see, Ankeny Square, vandalized, has a cyclone fence around it now. Could this space be an art center in the homeless area in the Pearl? Could this place be an art center for the right brand? Oh, sorry, brain? Brain? Oh, for the right brain. It does say brand, but right brain, sorry. Thoughts about that?
I mean, I think anything is worth exploring. You know, when you are looking at spaces, and I don't want to leave makers out of the conversation, but when you're looking at spaces where you have people that are artists and artisans and small manufacturers, location is pretty important. People need to be able to get to it. They need to be able to get to it in multiple ways so that they can either work there, volunteer there, take a class there, go to a performance there. So when you're looking at different locations, how accessible is it? What are the amenities around it? Can people go grab a sandwich for lunch? Can somebody go get a cup of coffee before or after a drink after a performance? You need to look at the location. You need to look at the zoning. You need to look at the bones of what might be existing there because, again, sometimes, not always, but sometimes it's almost less expensive to start with a clean slate than have an existing older building that you have to go back and retrofit with the correct seismic upgrading and the sprinklering and the exiting and those kinds of things. So I think it's just something that you look at on a case-by-case basis and know that there are a certain group of kind of criteria and parameters that would make a site lend itself to some sort of arts or collaborative or maker kind of location or space.
Yeah, that's an interesting point when we map out the ecosystem of proximity to these organizations to each other. It's incredible. What we have in the Central East Side is really special for an urban area. That's been lost in most cities. So we have a real opportunity, and we look forward to continuing this conversation, continuing to work with our existing and future elected officials to keep the pressure on to solve these problems collectively. And thanks for your thoughts and ideas. I think we have a good list going that we can start to work on. And I guess I'll turn it back over.
Yes, we're out of broadcast time and we'll have to stop for the day. If this program has inspired you to join the City Club, you could do so at the registration table in the back of the room, or just before you leave the room. This is Sal Nutor, member of the City Club Board of Governors. Please join me in thanking our panel and moderator, as well as Tony Tabara Roberts of the Friday Forum Committee, who produced this program. We're adjourned.